on to Conversations with Dr. Els, another Sunday, and it is great to have you guys locked on to Conversations with Dr. Els. It's a beautiful day here, and I know that if you are in the USA, it's Super Bowl time, and some of you might be watching Super Bowl, but I want to say hello to Jennifer Joseph. Great having you locked on to Conversations with Dr. Els. In North America, it's pretty cold today. It's probably one of the coldest day of the year, or the winter season so far. And I was told that maybe it's about the coldest in almost 20 something years. But wherever you are, if you're in the north and you're experiencing winter, I want to encourage you to stay warm. And if you are in the warmth of the Caribbean or the tropics, I want to say, hey, send some warmth to your friends and families who may be experiencing winter. Hi, Karen Roberts. Great having you locked on to Conversations with Dr. Els. It's great to see you. Hope you are doing well. All right. I also want to say to Princess Vicky, great having you locked on to Conversations with Dr. Els. And I know that you guys have been having a great day. I believe so. All right. Good evening to you. And wherever you are across the Caribbean, North America, Europe, South America, Central America, wherever you are, in whatever continent you're watching us from, I want to give you a pretty great shout out. And so it's good to have you. Yes, it is nice to see you, my schoolmate. You're locked in from United Kingdom. Great seeing you as always. Great to be able to connect, even if it is on this social media. All right, but guys, I want you to do something for me. I want you to share this conversation. Let someone know Conversations with Dr. Els is on. Last week we started talking about the whole idea of why it is hard to leave. We are in February. February is often the relationship month, Valentine's, and you have all of that happening. And so we want to continue to talk about why is it so hard to leave. But let me say hello to my brother Sedley Jeffers. Great having you locked on to Conversations with Dr. Els. And also Nyasha Warrell. Great having you locked on to Conversations with Dr. Els. And I'm telling you, I appreciate you guys, and it's really great to have you locked on, and I'm looking forward for a great conversation with you. Remember this, that in Conversations with Dr. Els, you have a chance to share your opinion, your experience, and all of that. It is not just a conversation where I teach or lecture or something like that, but it is one where you can share your opinion. Before we get into our conversation today, I want to share a resource with you, and that is from one of my books. This one is called Fruit of the Womb, and it is a book on parenting. And if you guys know anyone who is a parent, who have whether it's a toddler, baby, teenager, or just who want to do better in their parenting and need some help, this is a great book for you to share with them. I just want to read a quick excerpt from this book. It says, when God entrusts a child into the arms of a parent, he plans not only a life but a legacy. Every child is a divine seed, fearfully and wonderfully made, uniquely designed, full of purpose, that must be nurtured, guided, and protected. Parenting is not an accident of biology, it is the sacred calling of cultivation. Like a farmer tending his field, every parent must learn the rhythms of soil and season, sowing, watering, waiting, and harvesting in faith. Yet, parenting is rarely neat or predictable. Children, like fruit, come in varieties. Some are tender as strawberries, others resilient like lemons. Some grow in clusters like bananas, others in layers of mystery like coconuts. Each carries sweetness to delight, sourness to challenge, seeds of legacy hidden within, and fragile skin that bruise if handled carelessly. To raise children well is to raise children well is to enter God's orchard and learn the wisdom of cultivation. In our modern age, parenting often becomes reactive instead of intentional. And so this is a great book. It's called Fruit of the Womb. It's a great book that I would like to share with you. This book is not a technical manual, nor is it a sentimental collection of memories. It is really a biblical meditation woven into practical wisdom, an orchard of lessons for those entrusted with the heritage of children. And you're going to find this book very helpful, especially those of you who have young children, whether it's baby or toddler, or even up to teenagers, and even if you have adult children, this is a great book for you to read and one that you can share with others. All right, so this is a great resource. You can get it on Amazon. You can go to Amazon and you can get this, or you can send me a message. You can message me right here on our live, and I'll tell you how you can get a copy of this great book. All right, but in the meantime, I want to say hi to our First Lady, Lady Trizette. Great having you locked on to Conversations with Dr. Els this evening. And I must say to you guys that the inspiration for writing has been because of my spiritual father, my senior pastor, and my mentor, Dr. Peter Bonady, the husband of the lovely Lady Trizette. All right, so guys, I really want you to just check out that book, and I want to just say hi to Norlene Richardson Hayward. Great having you locked on to Conversations with Dr. Els. Also, Pastor Althea Alexander. Great having you locked on. Good evening to you, and God bless you, and thank you so much. Thank you so much. All right, we have been talking about why is it so hard to leave. Now, I heard a story, whether it is true or not. I heard a story of a man whose wife or whose partner was abusing him. And one time when he did not wash the wares, and she came home and realized the wares weren't clean, she got a broomstick. Those, you know what a broomstick is. She got a broomstick and she started to beat him. So he ran under the bed. Right, he ran under the bed, and she, with the stick, poking him and trying to get him out. And she was saying, "Come out!" And his response was like, "I am not coming out. I am the man in here. I am not coming out." All right, and that, whether it is a true story or not, it's a story that talks about abuse. On the other hand, there are many ladies who are are in relationships and they've been abused and they've been trying to get out. Some has been trying to get out, but others are there. And we who are on the outside often say, why is it she doesn't leave, or why is it that he doesn't leave that relationship? It is clear that the person who's been abused, you can see the black and blues. You can. They have to go to the hospital or the clinics or whatever. They actually, for ladies, they tend to even hide the abuse by putting on a lot of makeup, foundation, and all of that, just to hide the abuse. And we who are on the outside often say, why is it that she doesn't leave, or why is it that he doesn't leave? And so we have been talking about this question. Why is it hard for someone in an abusive relationship to leave? From the outside, leaving an abusive relationship seems like the obvious choice, right? And so friends and family and even strangers would often say, come on, leave the man or leave the woman, right? We would often see that. We would often hear that. But the person in the relationship is like, I can't leave. I am not going to leave. And you ask why. And so last week, we started sharing a few things why it is hard for some persons to leave the relationship. And again, I want to encourage you, like we've had last week. We had a number of persons sharing in the chat, giving their opinions and such like that. We want to encourage you to do so, right? We want to encourage you to do so, to just share your thoughts on this matter. Why is it hard for someone to leave an abusive relationship? And some of the things that we talked about last week, we said fear is like the silent jailer, all right? Fear is more than an emotion. It is like a biological lock on the nervous system. And so when the person live in constant anticipation of the next outburst from that abuser, their bodies are flooded with adrenaline and these stress hormones. And what happened over time, this state kind of becomes permanently activated. And so because of fear, they don't want to leave. Some actually, some actually are afraid because when they tried to leave before and the abuser found out, they got abused even worse, and so they're afraid to leave because of that. They think that they will lose their life, or we have children involved. We also said that another reason why the abused do not want to leave is because of financial entrapment. So the abuser may be the one who is bringing in the finances, is responsible to provide for the family and such like that. And the abused may not have the kind of resources of his or her own. And so in what they would be thinking, if I leave, who's going to take care of the children? Who am I going to look to? Where am I going to find finances? And they may be in debt. They may have bills pile up or something. They have no savings. Their credit is ruined and such something like that. So because of that, they are afraid to leave. And we had these things coming up in our last conversation. We had persons share that, and I want to encourage you again, if you could share some of the things. We would see your comment, we would read your comment and read your experience or your opinion and your expertise in the matter. I'm sure you probably know someone who have been in an abusive relationship. You can share that on this live. All right. Another thing that we said was a reason why the abused do not leave, it is because of family and cultural expectation. Oftentimes, the expectation of communities and families often measure especially a woman's worth by their ability to endure and to keep the family intact in spite of the cost, right? And so sometimes, you would have the elders might tell you, well, marriage have struggles and you have to carry your cross and such like that. And friends may also suggest that the person being abused is exaggerating, or for example, being a past police. I remember at one police station, I won't say where it was, but in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, a man came in to make a report of being abused. His spouse, I think it was his girlfriend at that time, abusing him, and he came to make the report, and the police then laughed at him and joked at him. And so all this because it was expected. If you're the man in the house, you should not be abused by a woman. All right. So we have these things happening, and because of that, persons especially males, are in abusive relationship, and they will not tell others. All right. So the cultural shame compounds that pressure. If a woman fail in her marriage, divorce at the time or separating at the time, is almost like a disgrace in some culture. And even in the Caribbean, a mother may tell her daughter to hold on for the sake of the children. Or in Africa, you may have an aunt warning her that leaving makes her unmarriageable again. All right, and so we have where persons, if you are leaving a relationship, especially a marriage, family and cultural expectation makes it hard. Let me just pause and say hi to Jack Joe. Great having you locked on to Conversations with Dr. Els. Greetings to you, my brother. Also, Loveline John. Great having you locked on to Conversations with Dr. Els. So we are dealing with why is it hard for a person to leave an abusive relationship. And I was just talking about that. I mentioned it. We also talk about the whole aspect of children. Children are sometimes an anchor in relationship. And so nothing complicates leaving more than children. Mothers often feel trapped in an agonizing paradox. Leave and risk financial instability, or deal with custody battles or the disruption to their children's life and such like that. So when children are in a relationship, it makes it difficult for that person, that mother especially, to leave the relationship, and so they stay for the child's sake. They feel that, I want to shield my child. I want to shield my children. But yet we understand that the children are never really truly shielded. Even though they may not be physically harmed, they observe that toxic relationship. And studies have shown that children who grew up in abusive household often battle with things like anxiety and depression and aggression, or even difficulty forming healthy relationships later in life. All right. And so many, especially women, convince themselves that staying in the relationship for the child or the children is noble. So again, outside we may say, why don't they leave? But these are some of the reasons why they won't leave. All right, let me pause and say, great having you locked on to Conversations with Dr. Els Singnaburg. Great having you. All right, so we do have UK in the house. We have Canada in the house, the US in the house. We do have St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Barbados in the house. All right, great having all you guys locked on to Conversations with Dr. Els. All right, and I want to encourage you to share this conversation and also to comment, share your opinions and your expertise and your experiences here in this conversation. All right, great having you locked on. Oh, I see Juliet Boucher. Great having you locked on to Conversations with Dr. Els. So another reason why we see persons being afraid to leave a relationship is the whole aspect of spiritual manipulation, and this this hurts a lot. Me being a pastor, me being a Christian, I mean, this hurts because I've seen it and I've heard it, right? Where we have Christians twisting scriptures. They're twisting scriptures to keep someone in that relationship. And so many are told that, hey, you can't leave the relationship because divorce is wrong and it is the unpardonable sin. It's unacceptable. And they will say, as a wife, especially for the ladies, they will tell them, as a wife, you must submit to your husband because that is the highest calling. Or they may say, well, forgiveness must come, and forgiveness comes without accountability and such like that. And so some abusers weaponize verses like, wives, submit to your husband as unto the Lord, and such like that. But they ignore the command that says, husband loves your wife sacrificially. Right, so this kind of distorted theology, leaving becomes not just a personal failure, but it becomes a spiritual betrayal, and so some people are afraid to that. Some leaders manipulate their members who are trapped in abusive relationships. Right, I tell you, I shared this story last week. I remember pastoring a church, and this member of mine was in a relationship. She just gotten saved in a relationship with this guy, and I always smile because this girl was much physically bigger than this guy, and he would beat her and such like that. And one Sunday evening, I think, right just before church, she came and all bruised and start crying and such like that, and he came up behind her, and I stood up, right, and I said, if you touch her again, it's gonna be serious trouble. And I remember taking the young lady to the police station, jumped into my vehicle, took her to the police station, made a report and everything like that, because I said, you can't be continuing to do this, right? So as a leader, as a pastor, as a Christian, I do not condone abuse and stuff like that, but we do have persons who have that spiritual manipulation, and so the abused person tend to stay in the relationship because of that. All right, let me pause and say hey to Mr. Lester Eiffel. Great having you locked on to Conversations with Dr. Els, my brother. Amalia, great having you locked on to Conversations with Dr. Els also, and the beautiful, gorgeous, precious lady, the one and only Dale Hanil. Great having you locked on to Conversations with Dr. Els. Now, in continuing with some reasons, again, I want to encourage you to share some of the reasons you think why people stay in abusive relationship. But in continuing, we have things like shame. The weight of shame. Shame is like the poison poured slowly over time until it seeps into the vein, every vein of the abused person. And so abusers are masters of gaslighting, convincing their partners that the abuse is their fault. All right? So this is what we have abusers saying. The abuser must say things like, if you didn't nag me, I won't hit you, right? Or You make me so angry. I can't control myself. And over time, what happens is that these lies become internalized, and they become internalized truth. So the abused person now believe that it is their fault why the abuser is abusing them, and what happened is that they feel shame, right? And they realize this is my fault. All right. Let me just read this comment. Dr. Els, I personally think some ladies need to be a little bit more considerate and understanding, mutual respect and mutual understanding. And yes, while that is true, I do not think that there is enough reason for abuse in a relationship, whether it is male or female. The very time that you are abusing, and remember, abuse is not only physical, but there are other forms of abuse. So there is always other ways that things can be remedied rather than abuse. All right. And right, like someone said, I think shame is one of the most excuses. Very much so. They feel ashamed. And you know, psychologists know that shame corrodes self-worth. And we know that, right? And it corrodes it until the abused person believes that he or she deserves no better. So they get to the place where they're told it is your fault. If you didn't do that, I would not have done this. And if you didn't nag me, I would not have hit you, or such like that. And what happened is that the person feels so ashamed that it is their fault that they believe, well, I mean, I did it, so I deserve no better than this. And oftentimes, you know, they may be looking in the mirror and see themselves not so much as a victim of abuse, but as a failure, because I am the one who caused it. All right. And the internal voice begins to silence they silence them, from seeking help, because it's saying, you know, I am the one who is causing this, and I am the one who is weak. If I would just stop nagging him, or if I would just stop telling her about this or that, he or she would stop. And so shame is oftentimes even heavier than bruises, right? Because of course bruises fades, but shame lingers, and it lingers in the soul. And as long as shame speaks louder than hope, the person is not going to want to leave. Leaving feels like escaping into a world where the abused worth will never be restored. Okay? But then, you know, there's another aspect of this thing, right? And I've seen it, I've heard it, I've counseled people with this, is the whole seduction of apology. You know, so after every storm, you put it the way, comes the calm, right? So the abuser now apologizes, right? And this is very, very dangerous. To me, I think this is the most dangerous moment of all in the abuse relationship. So the abuser comes, and he or she, you know, comes with tears, or comes with promises, comes with gifts, or, you know, the tender words, and they revive the memory of the man or the woman that he or she first loved. So the abused now begin to remember all the nice things and the good things, and psychologically this fuels what experts call intermittent reinforcement. So what happens, you know, like a gambler who keeps playing for one more win. All right, let me just play one more time. I'm gonna win it one more time, even though they've lost over a period. Just it's like, this time I would win. So just like a gambler, the abused person stay in the relationship one more chance, you know. Let's give him one more chance, or let's give her one more chance. And then these apologies are often accompanied by what is often called love bombing. So what happened there is, after the abuse, after the nasty words, and after the bruises, and so here she comes, and in some case there is even sex. So he or she comes, and they lavish the affection. There's the romantic gestures, or there's the declaration of eternal love, and there is makeup. There's something, I think there's a song that says there's nothing better than a kiss and makeup. And so even in the abuse cycle, when that happens, let me be honest with you. Outside, we're talking about the person in the abuse relationship, and the fact that outside of the relationship, we often say, why doesn't the person leave? But I'm still yet to understand. I can't say that I have it together. But I'm still yet to understand why a woman could still make love or have sex with a man after he's beaten her, or even telling her all the worst things about her body parts and such like that. And right after that, they end up in sexual intercourse. So, what the experts are saying basically is that seduction of apology, it happens. And so, there is that lavish affection, and so for a woman especially who is starved of tenderness, this phase feels really intoxicating. It's good. It convinced her that perhaps the abuser would change, or perhaps the abuse was a mistake, and change is finally here. So after the abuse, there's that love and such like that. All right. So let me pause and just say hi to Alma Toussaint. Great having you locked on to Conversation with Dr. Els. All right. So we're talking about some reasons why it is hard for the abused person to leave a relationship. Right. And the truth is, we're talking about the apology. The apology is not change really, but it's almost like the reset button of this cycle of abuse and apology and abuse and apology. So it is a seduction that is so powerful that the abused person believe it. The heart longs to believe that, he or she is going to change, and we have that happening. But we also have things like the aspect of love and loyalty, because despite the cruelty, oftentimes many women especially still love the man behind the mask. You remember those days, and you oftentimes the woman especially truly love him, right? And they remember the early days. They remember the laughter, the shared dreams, and the hope of building a life together. And so they cling to that loyalty, not because they're necessarily blind, but because their heart long for that redemption. They long for that time together. And so love is one of humanity's most noble qualities, right? But in an abusive relationship, it becomes like a double-edged sword, right? And so the same loyalty that binds that mother to that child, or that is the loyalty that binds the wife to the abuser, or the woman to the abuser. So it convinces her that leaving equals betrayal. It's almost like if I would leave my child is betrayal, and so that love causes that same feeling. Let me just pause and just read this comment. Guess sometimes it's about attachment, right? It may make intimacy feel like a way to restore peace, and that is so true. All right. because they feel attached. They feel that, hey, I would try to do this again, right? And he would change or she would change. Another comment, most times it's because the people have children and not working for themselves. I feel sorry for people like that, right? That comes to the aspect we were talking about, that financial entrapment, because you can't take care of your bills. You have children, you don't want them to be hungry and such like that. People stay in an abusive relationship for that. Financial difficulties too, and the woman might think she can't make it alone. Thank you guys. These are some great comments. It's a fact. These and so I think what needs to happen, we're gonna get to that just now, but I want to say it again. We have to be quite sympathetic and be tactful. I should say we should be empathetic more so than being sympathetic with the person in the abused relationship. All right, and be of help, some sort of help. Okay, so those are some reasons why people stay in relationship. Let me pause and just say hi to Curtis. Curtis Thomas, one of our regular here on Conversations with Dr. Els. Great to have you locked on. So that loyalty, right? That love, which should give wings, and instead of clipping the wings, become that thing that really hold the person, right? Loyalty should really empower, but instead in abuse relationship it imprisons the person. And so you have that cycle that continues and sustain during this abuse relationship, right? Okay, let me read this comment also. Some stay because of wrong encouragement. I must say, oh, my sister, pray about it. God will change him. God gives us wisdom, and abusive relationship is nothing to stay in. Do we really think God will give us a husband that is abusive? Some of us married outside the will of God. All right. And so a couple of things with that, we understand, we talked about it in the spiritual environment. Oftentimes the person has been encouraged to stay because, you have to obey your husband and all sort of stuff like that. One of the things that come to realize is that people stay in relationship because of what is called trauma bonding, or even the psychologists give this hope addiction, give it the term hope addiction. In other words, so the abused person who is addicted to hope, they believe in themselves that someday they will be able to there will be change and such like that. And so they are bonded, all right, in the relationship. And trauma bonding is one of the most perplexing and heart-wrenching realities of abusive relationships. All right. Let me just go back. I missed this comment, which is interesting. It says, it is said the body can respond even though the heart is hurt, especially for a man. And yes, that is true, especially for a man who intimacy oftentimes is separated, so his body would respond to such. So that is so true. Great having you locked on to Conversation with Dr. Els. Monique Kwame, great having you locked on, my classmate. Great having you. All right, but we're talking about the whole aspect of trauma bonding, right? And so to us, a lot of time, to us as outsiders, it often seems impossible to understand that whole idea of trauma bonding, right? Because it's a reality in abusive relationship. So we say, why doesn't she leave? Why doesn't she just leave? Or why doesn't he just leave? Why would anyone stay after what he or she just did? Right? So we say that because we are not in the relationship. And mind you, let me put this disclaimer here. I do not agree with any type of abuse in relationship. All right. But what I'm saying is that on the outside, for those of us who are not in the abusive relationship, we need to understand some of the reasons why the abused person do not just readily leave, and why it is hard for them to leave. Because if we understand that, we would be better equipped to help them. All right. So for those of us outside, the bond is not only sorry, for those who are inside, the bond is not only real, but it seems unbreakable, right? And for trauma bond is the emotional glue that forms between that victim and that abuser. So that's what trauma bonding is. It's like that emotional glue that is formed between the victim and the abuser. All right. And so a bond is forged not through love alone, but through the cycle of pain and relief. So through the cycle of the abuse, and then the apology and the love and the gifts and such, and then the abuse and then the apologies and the love. So through that cycle, a bond is being formed, right? And so the abusive partner alternates between cruelty and kindness, and between punishment and reward. And so what happens over time, the victim begins to associate their sense of safety not with freedom, but with the abuser himself or herself. That's what happened. That is what trauma bonding does. This is what had happened. And so the very one who inflicts the wound also becomes the one who apply the healing or the balm. And this creates like a confusion in the mind of the person, and they stay in the relationship. Let me just pause and say, great having you locked on to Conversations with Dr. L. Susan Souls, right there in Trinidad and Tobago. Great having you locked on to Conversations with Dr. Els. And so we are talking about why is it hard for persons to leave an abusive relationship, right? So we're talking about the whole aspect of trauma bonding, and that create some dependency, all right? Instead of seeing the abuser as the problem, the abused person see the abuser as part of the solution, because they believe that if only he could get better, then everything would be resolved. All right, let me say hi to Monique Sanford. Great having you locked on to Conversations with Dr. Els. Mr. Annan Cameron Tanis, great having you locked on to Conversations with Dr. Els. All right. So we are talking about the whole idea of trauma bonding, and trauma bonds are rooted oftentimes in survival instincts, right? So when human face threats, our bodies shift into the fight, flight, or freeze mode, right? And so for the woman who cannot fight back or flee, what happened? Perhaps because, again, what we talked about before, finances, children, or fear, the mind finds that fourth option. And what it does, it attach. Okay? So the woman attach because of trauma bonding. And over time, what happened? This survival strategy turns into a powerful emotional connection, and it is one that feels like loyalty, but it is really captivity. All right, let me just pause and say hi to Williams Venus. Great having you locked on to Conversation with Dr. Els. All right, one person says you have various types of trauma bonding and the typical Stockholm syndrome. All right, you do have that several types of trauma bonding that we can talk about. You can look it up. But this is one of the reasons why people stay in relationship, because they have that idea of trauma bonding. All right. Great having you locked on to Conversations with Dr. Els Marcia Clark. Great having you locked on. Now, so we're talking about that whole idea of the cycle of abuse and reinforcement, right? Because they do not come just at the same time, but it does begin with cruelty, and then it doesn't end with cruelty all the time, right? It repeats like a loop. Tension build up, arguments, whatever, an explosion may occur, then you have apologies, and then comes that what is called the honeymoon phase of reconciliation, and that goes on, the honeymoon phase goes on for a little while, and then the abuser in that honeymoon phase will shower the partner with affection and promises, I'll never do it again, and some extravagant gestures, and these moments of tenderness are just so pleasant that they become addictive. All right. And so there is a let me read this comment. Well, it is actually a question. What if the abuser is the pastor and the wife keep covering it? What should she do? Right, very, very good question. What if the abuser is, and you said a pastor, and I will whine with, what if the abuser is a spiritual leader, all right, and the wife keep covering it up? We see some of the reasons why it keep cover up, but I like this response also. Find another senior trusted seasoned professional pastor to report it to. All right, you have to, if that happens, remember we're saying it doesn't matter who the person is, right? The abuse would not want to leave because of certain stigmas and such like that, certain reasons, right? If the person really need help, I agree with the response to the comment. Find a trusted person. Find someone. There's often usually someone that the pastor or the leader would look up to or would confide in or such. But you've got to find someone who will deal with the matter and deal with it in such a way to help you and also to help that pastor or the leader. So that is important. Find someone else to talk to. Don't say, well, because he is a pastor, she's a pastor, I can't say anything. If you want to get out, you're going to find someone to talk to. All right? And so what we have is, in the cycle of the abuse relationship, you have that hope addiction. Persons, believe that one day that things would change, right? But then, I said earlier, I do not believe in abuse, all right? I do not believe in abuse. And so I would often say the reason, if you need to get out the relationship, it will be good to get out. It's not as easy because of all the factors that we've spoken about. But here let me help you understand that the cause of staying bound is serious. There are persons who stay in the relationship because of children, because of shame, because of financial entrapment and all of that, and they end up leaving not by choice, but because they end up being expired. The abuse becomes so devastating that they were killed in that relationship. So remaining in the grip of trauma bonding and hope addiction comes with some devastating consequences. All right, and so you have things like the sense of self-worth. You lose your self-worth. You lose your identity, because your identity becomes tied to the cycle of abuse, and you begin to see yourself less than a whole person. And you see yourself more as an extension of his or her mood. So you believe that, you know what, I deserve this. If he is happy, she feels secure. If he is angry, she feels worthless, and vice versa. If she is happy, he feels secure, and if she is angry, he feels worthless. And slowly, his or her sense of identity evaporates, and so choices that the abuse would make would freely being dictated by his or her approval or disapproval. So when we think of things like the emotional toil on the relationship or on the abuse is huge, it's enormous. If you constantly live in the tension of abuse relationship, it rewires the nervous system for fear. All right. And so, like I said earlier, there's anxiety, chronic anxiety, there's depression, there's panic attack. The abused person's body live in a state of heightened vigilance, and they're just waiting for the next explosion. And so they as we usually say, they're walking on eggshell, right? And what happened over time, it erodes the mental health of the abuse, and you're leaving them exhausted and fragile. All right. And so let me read this comment. I don't believe in abuse or to stay. Your personal stand is important. PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, is a thing also. The person's mental condition is key in making a sound decision. Self-concept is foundational. So very true. All right. That's what we're talking about. Your personal stand is important. You got to see yourself as worthy, all right, and better than being in an abusive relationship. Let me pause and say hi to LaFleur Robertson. Great having you locked on to Conversations with Dr. Els. All right. Then there is the cost for staying in an abusive relationship is not only personal, but it is generational. Right? It's generational. So that children who are raised in an abusive environment oftentimes internalize the cycle as normal. Right? So you have boys may grow up believing that dominance and control define masculinity. If I have to be a man, I have to beat up on somebody, right? And when he gets a girlfriend or something, he beats up on her. The girls in such a relationship may grow expecting love to hurt, right? I'm sure you probably have heard women say, if he doesn't beat me, he won't. How it goes again. If he doesn't love me, he won't beat me, or such like that. Or, they feel that they deserve this. All right. So the cause is generational. It affects the children too. And even if the abuser never touches the children, they observe that toxic environment. Okay. They see it, they feel it, and they carry it into their adult relationship. Right. Then there is the economically the cost of staying in the abused relationship can be crushing, because years spent in dependency may leave the person without a saving, without work experience, without access to financial resources, and by the time that person consider leaving, the practical barriers can be so insurmountable that she just felt like, I can't leave, right? How will I survive if I go? Where will I go? And so the abuser counts on these fears, knowing that they reinforce that bond, all right? Let me just say hi to Maria Julian, great having you locked on to Conversations with Dr. Els. And readers come in some cases, the church has placed so much emphasis on until death do us part that people, especially women, think it is biblical, which is false. And that is so true. All right. Unfortunately, for some people, it becomes until death do us part because they eventually get died in that relationship. But this is false. As a church, as a Christian, any pastor, if you, let me say this emphatically, if you're going to a church and the leaders of the church is encouraging you to stay in an abusive relationship, leave that church. All right? Leave that church. If you know that you are being encouraged to stay in an abusive relationship, my encouragement to you is to leave that church, find somewhere else. Right, thank you, that's it. If he don't beat me, he don't love me. Right, that's what some women say. Right, so the cost of staying in such an abusive relationship is serious. All right, but how do we break the bond? And I want to just kind of close with this. I know we've run over my usual 45 minutes, but I want to wrap this. I want to wrap this up by how do we break the bond, that trauma bond? Because it's very important, and we can help persons break that trauma bond, right? So escaping is less like, walking away from a bad relationship. And more escaping is more like detoxing from a powerful drug. If you understand the whole drug thing, you don't just walk away unless you have serious deliverance. You have to detox from that. And this is the same thing with trauma bonding. So the first step is recognition. You have to recognize, you have to name the bond for what it is. All right? Because, some women especially, some people just believe that they're simply being forgiven because especially that's what they were told. You have to forgive. Or some believe that it's just that they're being patient, right? That's why they're there. But calling it by its true name, trauma bonding or abuse, right? That shatters the illusion that endurance equals love. That shatters the illusions that if I love him, I would stay, I would endure. All right? Because what happened is that when you recognize that, recognition strips away denial. You realize that, hey, this is an abusive relationship. This is not good for my health. It's not good for my children. It begins to strip away the things like denial or forcing the abused person to see the cycle clearly. All right, let's read this comment. If you are Christians and understand your identity, then divorce is made easier if in an abusive relationship. Marriage too will be different when selecting. Self-love is also respect for God. All right, and I totally agree with that. Terms of loving yourself, understanding who you are, and knowing your identity, right? So we're saying the first step in breaking the bond, the trauma bonding, is recognition. Recognize the relationship for what it is. All right. The second step is building a support system. Building a support system. No one can break trauma bonds in isolation. Believe it or not, it is let me put it this way, it's very, very difficult to break trauma bond in isolation because the shame and secrecy that protects the abuser must be countered with trusted allies. Find friends, find mentors, find counselors, find pastors who affirm your dignity and remind you of your worth. And that's what we're seeing some of the comments there, just your self-worth. Find persons who affirm your dignity and your self-worth. Support provides that accountability and that encouragement that is needed when withdrawal hits. All right, because understand this, like drugs, if you're in an abusive relationship and you leave, withdrawal will come. There are times you're gonna feel like, I should go back. I missed him or I missed her, and he used to do this for me and she used to do this for me and stuff like that. And so you have that withdrawal symptoms, right? And in those times, you need support. All right. Just as an addict craves the substance that is killing them, oftentimes the abused person crave that comfort that the abuser would give. And then there is things like loneliness, and then there is things like guilt and fear, and that surges to the surface when the person leaves, right? And that tempts them to return. So during this stage, there is the whole idea of relapse. Relapse is common. Persons want to go back, but relapse is not something that you want happen. That's why you need a support. All right. The bond has been real in many cases, and it requires persistence to break that bond. So professional counseling might be needed. Trauma-informed therapy might be needed. Safe housing in some cases may be needed. But you need support around you, even through the darkest period. And so we're saying that in breaking the bond, you have to first recognize what it is. You have to build a support system. And finally, before we close, you have to breaking the bond requires reclaiming hope, and that whole self-awareness and who you are. All right, so we're not talking about false hope in the apologies of the abuser, but we're talking about real hope in a life that is beyond that abuser, beyond him or beyond her. You want to have that hope, reclaim that hope that your life could be better. Even if you have gone through that cycle of abuse, your life could be better. And this hope is strengthened by envisioning a future filled with peace and safety and self-worth, right? And so as the abused person begins to taste freedom, the grip of the trauma would begin to weaken. And what once felt like the only option begins to look like the prison that it truly is. All right? And so these are some of the things that happens. Let me just read this comment. The day I fought back physically was the day it ended. All right, and this is an experience that is being shared. So you got to understand that sometimes we are out of the relationship and we think that it's just easy for the person to leave. But there are so many layers that we have to understand. However, it is very, very important that the person leave that relationship and understand how to do it, finding support. Listen, guys, I'm in the process of putting together a webinar to deal with identity, reawakening identity, and I'm looking forward. There will be a small contribution for this webinar, but it is something that is going to help both male and females. Let me just see here. And it is a webinar called Reclaiming Identity, Walking in Strength and Wholeness. That webinar and workshop that we're gonna have at some point. But I'm telling you, I want you to look out for this, both for males and females. But identity, because it's very important in breaking that whole abusive relationship, right? And so is so very, very important. Let me just read this comment before we close. Dr. Els on Chamabonin, just sort of repeating, thank you so much. Recognize that strips denial, building a support system, reclaim hope, right? And yes, standing up can break the cycle, though scary. And you have to know, because like some people are able to fight back and get out of it. Some people get damaged in that and probably may even die. But guys, especially in this time where, people celebrate Valentine, I want you to think of those who are in the cycle of broken relationships, abusive relationships, and such like that. And in any way that you can help that person to recognize, because it's very important, at least to recognize the relationship or recognize what is happening, it is easy, or easier, I should say, for the person to be able to get out of that relationship. Let's help somebody to walk through and work through this whole aspect of relationships. All right. And for you ladies, I also want to recommend, especially if you are not married, or you know somebody who's not married, I want to recommend another resource. This book was written by Dr. Peter Bonady and myself. We co-authored this book called These Deadly Dudes: Exposing Men That Make Marriage a Living Hell. And I think it would be a great book for you to give someone who's dating, someone who's looking for a relationship, and even someone who may be in a woman who may be in an abusive relationship. There is a counter to that, which is Dangerous Darlings. So if you know any man or so in that such a relationship, I recommend these books for them. But again, I want to thank you for being such a great part of Conversations with Dr. Els. And don't forget, you can get Fruit of the Womb, Parenting with Purpose from Seed to Harvest. You can find that also on Amazon for anyone who is a parent, and it's a great gift to give, especially if you know any expecting mothers or let me just say, this is not just for mothers. Some people see the woman on the cover, but it's not just for mothers, it's for both mothers and fathers. So it's about parenting. It's not just about women. So you can check that out on Amazon, or you can message me right here and let me tell you how you can get a copy of this great book. So it's really been a great time with you guys. We've gone even over an hour, but I really wanted for us to dig into this, and thank you for those pertinent and very important comments and questions, and I'm looking forward to see you again next week at the same time, 6:30 Eastern Standard Time. And I want to encourage you, even after this broadcast, you can share this. There are persons who need to hear this, right? So you can share it and let someone be helped, right? So until next week, God's willing, remember, whatever you do this week, add value to someone's life, okay? Whatever you do this week, add value to someone's life. Make them better than they've been, right? So help add some value to their life. God bless you, and see you next week for another Conversations with Dr. Els.